Have you ever wondered what it'd be like to have a fresh start? To have your own space to create and build? With only your wits and the resources available to forge a life for yourself. Lots of media features this idea, recently explored in shows like Alone and movies like The Martian. And as we'll look at today, video games. The obvious genre that lets you live off the land is the survival genre, but the simulator genre also offers a fascinating take on this concept. I've devised a challenge to show what's possible in a short amount of time in these games. Today, we're going to be playing Dwarf Fortress and Rimworld and seeing which one comes out on top. In Dwarf Fortress, you lead a band of fantasy dwarves in the hopes of building a lasting legacy in an AI-generated world. Although previously only published in a cryptic ASCII style, the game is now boasting a full graphics overhaul and UI improvements. The dwarves in this game have thoughts, feelings, and goals of their own. Paying attention to just their hunger and thirst is not enough. Its contender will be Rimworld, an AI storyteller game from Ludian Studios. Before each session, your crew crash lands on a mysterious planet and must survive any dangers the AI storyteller throws at them. Gameplay is harsh, visceral, with little dilemmas snowballing quickly into a full-on catastrophe. These games are complex, and they really simulate what a survival situation would be like. Here's the challenge we'll be using to test these games out. Number 1. Each game will have a low-tech setting. Basically, we're going to choose the lowest tech options possible to really simulate a true survival experience. Number 2. Each game will be played for about 30 minutes in real time for 4 days in total. Having similar times for each game will really show how much you can get done in a certain amount of time of gameplay. Typically people, if they're going to stick with the game, I feel like they'd stick with it for about 4 hours before they're like, yeah, I'm staying with this game. At least that's me. Finally, number 3. At the end of all 4 days, the settlements will get ranked in terms of looks, efficiency, happiness, and overall safety. And I'll give an average total for each settlement and tell you which game came out looking the best. These games are pre-recorded, but we'll be following along as it all went together. The first thing every fortress needs is to pick a place to call home. Once the world was generated, I searched for a very specific spot to found my settlement. I definitely didn't want an aquifer. What that is basically an underground layer of water that can really screw up a mining operation and could even lead to a few deaths if you're not careful. We also needed to make sure we had plenty of resources and building supplies, stone, wood, foraging that you could do, hunting. I took all that stuff into account. I ended up choosing the tropical savanna called the Prairie of Anguishing. Fun name, I know. But it had a good year-round temperature. I thought it looked like a pretty good spot, so I just went for it. When you're venturing into the unknown, you need to have a variety of skills at your disposal. In Dwarf Fortress, there's way more skills than points available. For my team here, I focused on survival skills, crafting, and some creative talents, such as singing, dancing, public speaking, that would draw people in when we eventually build a tavern. One of the cooler aspects of this game is that not only can they learn and improve the skills they already have, they can actually teach each other some of these skills. So just because we don't have every skill on the list doesn't mean we won't have every skill eventually, especially when the population starts increasing and we get new residents. We also had to pick our starting items and starting animals, which also cost points. I went with yaks because eventually we can actually milk them, and I made sure to have a family of them so we get more yaks and maybe eventually sell them with traveling traders. Also, yaks are freaking cool, man. And I've never seen one in real life, so I'm kind of like, that's on my bucket list. Next, we have the part that I find to be the most difficult in the starting game, is picking what gear. Look how many items you can start with. And you have to share these points with the animal section as well. So you really have to choose wisely, especially because early on, if you don't have certain supplies, you can kind of get stagnated in which workshops you can create. And to finish things off, I went ahead and added a goose. Just something cute that can walk around the settlement and people can interact with. I like geese. I know some people don't like them. They prefer ducks. Geese are underrated, guys. And with that, we are all ready to embark. And here we are. We arrived with very few supplies. According to this, it was a very long journey from the mountain homes, which is like where all the dwarves come from in this game. And I had the sellers get right to work, digging into the mountain to create a first and second floor where they could start expanding and creating a home. For food and drink, we built a still to make the beverages, a kitchen, and a butcher shop. So we'll be able to prepare food, process it, and make it edible for our settlers. And for building supplies, we made a carpentry and stoneworker workshop. These basically are bread and butter. It's probably going to fuel most of our growth during the 4 days. Taking a quick look at how the dwarves feel. So far, they all want alcohol, so we're going to need to keep that still running. That means crafting tons of barrels and filling them up with whatever the heck they usually drink, like wine and rum and stuff like that. That's one way in which these guys aren't really like human beings, is they don't really need water. As long as they're drinking booze, they'll be fine. So here's how day 1 turned out in Dwarf Fortress. As you can see, it's not quite home yet, but it's livable. Now let's hop over to Rimworld and get that settlement started. Now moving on to Rimworld, here we are at day 1. We went with the Lost Tribes starting point. Basically, we start with 5 people, low-tech options, similar to how we started in Dwarf Fortress. And I tried to balance their skills as much as I could. But unlike Dwarf Fortress, you can't manually pick the skills for each person. It's sort of randomly generated based on their backstory and childhood, which is kind of cool. It's like they each have their own little personal history. Anyway, we're not starting with much. We start with some crude weapons. Pemmican, which is basically a very stable food source made from plants and meat. And it has a very long shelf life. And we start with some starting pits. How great is that? Next, just like Dwarf Fortress, we had to randomize our starting world, and unlike Dwarf Fortress, we actually add a few factions in the world. I went ahead and added some like randomized stuff just to make it interesting. We added cannibal pirates and nudists. I know that sounds like very different people, but in-game it actually kind of seems like it all matches up. Just like in Dwarf Fortress, we had to pick where we started. I went with a nice temperate forest that, based on these temperatures that you see here, we're going to be farming all year round. This next bit comes from the Ideology DLC. You basically get to design your own religion from the ground up. I went with the more fluid option, which lets you pick certain things and let it develop naturally over time. I called it the Chris Converts, and of course, I wanted a dog as my logo because I love dogs. If you know me, you know I love my dogs. Also, this religion worships a sniper rifle, which is a little silly, but maybe they really like hunting, I don't know. I did try to keep it simple because if you make your religion too complicated or try to get too crazy with it, you can actually have some doctrines conflict. And so, for example, you could have a religion that worships trees, and then they also worship animals. But that means that they only want to use plants or animals. So now, every time they make food, they get mad. It's just one of those lessons you have to learn in-game the hard way, and I'm helping you guys out before you make the mistakes I have. All right, let's load up our world and see how it goes. So here's our tribe. It looks like our village was destroyed, which is kind of a nightmare for our fellas here. As you can see all the settlers at the top. We got turtle, orange, toad, hakuja, and kangaroo. They seem like a wonderful group of people. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. Spoiler alert, they're gonna have a rough time. So character creation and setup took a lot of day one. So the last of this is sort of us building the base. We set up in some old ruins nearby, and we used primarily wood materials to set up the walls and roofs, stuff like that. We also gathered some materials, mostly plants. Berries were our primary food source going into it. We don't have a ton of skilled hunters yet, so making sure they were consistently gathering natural, renewable food sources was very important. You can run out of food surprisingly fast in Rimworld. I would say a lot faster than even Dwarf Fortress. Now, unfortunately, night was falling, and we did not have any beds, so unfortunately for our villagers, they were sleeping on the ground tonight. One last thing I wanted to get done. I want to start gathering some precious metals and materials such as stone and steel. Those are going to come in big handy once we get some proper workbenches set up. As you can see, I'm kind of micromanaging them in the early game just because they sort of have an internal priorities, which you can set, but you can just overwrite that by issuing a direct order. Because sometimes, especially when they're stressed out, they'll just start doing random stuff and you're like, we're starving, get to work. And yeah, let's cut to day 2. We're starting back up with Dwarf Fortress. So day 2 for Dwarf Fortress, we had a lot of big goals. We started deep mining right away. We wanted as much stone and materials as we could get. Also, kind of like Rimworld, a ton of gathering is going on. We want fruits and vegetables because we want them cooking and brewing beverages non-stop. Also, they need a place to worship. They're kind of an ancient society, and so I set up their first temple. I built an altar, which is basically where they can leave offerings, and they sing and all kinds of cool stuff. Also, you gotta have a place to eat, so we set up a dining hall. The dwarves have sort of these needs that they need to meet, and each one has different ones. So some actually have a need to be crazy and destructive, and that's literally, if they don't do that, they'll go berserk. I also set up sort of a professional organization, a guild. This one was for the miners, and basically they're going to be doing a lot of mining, as you can see here, and I want them to kind of teach each other how to mine and how to mine better. And if they organize and do that, that can actually create a chain reaction where there's a bunch of skilled miners in the settlement. Finally, one of my favorite mechanics in Dwarf Fortress is the farming system. I set up a farmer's workshop, and basically there they can milk the animals that we have in our pens. They can also make cheese with that milk, and that's how you get cloth. You can shear animals and spin the thread into usable materials, and that's how you end up making clothes and stuff like that, which is actually a huge help once you start getting more settlers. Sometimes people will come in literally naked, and if you don't have clothes, it can get a little weird. So as you can see, there's so many different things you have to keep track of in these games. Even playing after this recording, I've learned so much that would have improved this fortress over what it is now. But it's a learning game, and you make mistakes, and failure is part of the process. One last thing before we hop back to Rimworld, we actually can train animals in this game. I appointed this dwarf here, Udil, to do it. So they're basically the de facto hunter, trainer. They're the animal person. They're like our zookeeper. And once you start getting pets and training them up, they can actually be a huge help and save lives. For example, if someone's attacking your settler and they have a war dog with them, they can actually help defend your settler, and that's kind of huge because injuries are very realistic in this game. And one broken hand and they can be down for weeks. All right, let's see how it's going in Rimworld. Day 2 in Rimworld, I would say, was very productive. We got a lot done. We set up our first animal pen so we can harvest resources from them like milk, and we got them all set up in there. For food as well, we also set up this farm, which they'll automatically plant and harvest. So that gives us 3 ways to get food: hunting, farming, and milking our animals, which sounds funny, but it's true. I mean, milk is a valuable resource in this. And now that's all set up, look at them go. If you guys remember when I said things would go wrong, this is when they went wrong. We had this traveling merchant visit, which is like awesome, dude. We can buy stuff we don't have, trade for stuff we do have. Unfortunately, I did it in the opposite order. So I sold all our food and all our medicine at the end of day 2. And I was really just face palming, guys. Like, how could I do this? But you can see the evidence here. I'm trading away the last of our food. The next 2 days are going to be very tough as we're trying to make up for that. Day 3 in Dwarf Fortress, and things are going really good. And what's a good dwarven fortress without knowledge? Okay, so we are going to build our very first library. I appointed Mestos as the scholar and Ravad as the scribe. So basically they produce and study written materials, which in an ancient society like this is like the first time this stuff's been written down, which is kind of cool. As you can see here, Bemble is pondering medical ethics. How beautiful is that? He's gonna lead the dwarves into the future. It's like we're forming a society from the ground up. Now let's look at how Rimworld's going. So right away, day 3 of Rimworld, and the game is telling me raiders are coming. Watch out. So I start building sandbags and barricades. I don't really have like a ton of ranged weapons. I don't think I have very many at all. Like maybe a bow if I can get the crafting up. However, a very cool thing is I found this building nearby, these abandoned ruins, and it already had pre-made beds. So you know how they've been sleeping on the ground? Now they are sleeping in these sarcophaguses, which is kind of spooky, but it's free bed and it's solid. So I set it up. So now they kind of have to walk a little bit to go sleep, but I think it's worth it. We started a new research on the great bow, so hopefully we'll be just like one-shotting deer eventually. That'd be really sick. Probably the craziest thing that happened this day on day 3 is this rat, this manhunter rat. Basically, it hunts down people on sight, and it attacked my boy Toad here, and now he's hospitalized. So basically, he's got to rest this off. He's got severe bleeding and cuts all over his body. Poor guy. While he's in bed rest, he's not going to be gathering supplies or building anything. So we're at a huge disadvantage for day 4. Day 4 in Dwarf Fortress, and oh my gosh, the yaks are having babies. How cute. They're a replenishable resource. We can make milk and cheese. Oh, it's gonna be awesome. And while we're at it, let's start decorating. I'm adding some flooring with extra materials, expanding the bedrooms. Very nice, because we're getting some more people coming in. And check this out, the woodcutters are unionizing. Look at these guys, they're training each other. Now that's innovation. You know what? I don't think this can get better. I think we beat Dwarf Fortress, guys. Woo! Yeah! Now that we've achieved greatness, let's hop back over to Rimworld for the last day. Ah, I see that Hakuja is wandering. They seem to have had a mental break and have lost their mind, so they're just wandering aimlessly. And they also have food poisoning, so they're throwing up everywhere, and oh, that's rough. Oh, and look, there's raiders. So here we go. Let's defend the camp from these raiders. Looks like Turtle's getting injured. He's bleeding everywhere. Oh, and now Kangaroo is smoking some good stuff, and nope, he's passing out from how good that was. And now we're eating our horse, so he will be missed. It was a good horse, a good stallion. All right, so now we're at the end of the challenge, and it's time for the final scores. For each of the categories, I'm going to do it out of 5, with 5 being like perfect, killed it. 1 being that is the worst of that category, known to man. Okay, so that's your scale. Perfect to disaster. Let's start off with Dwarf Fortress. Looks not the prettiest fortress. I'm not going to lie to you guys. You know, it was kind of just simple bedrooms, not a ton of art. I started installing some floors, but nothing substantial, and I give that a 2 on the looks category. It wasn't like terrible, but it was boring, right? I'd give looks a 2. For efficiency, and that's just how optimized it was, they were doing a pretty good job. Like, they were gathering stuff on their own, cooking and making drinks on their own. You know, they're all doing their business. So honestly, well-run ship, and I'd give that a 4 out of 5. Safety. Man, everybody was healthy. Everybody was happy. No one got hurt, which is like, I thought it was going to be like crazy. You know, we're in the wild. You're just living in a cave basically, and no injuries or health issues. So that's a 5 out of 5 safety. Happiness. They're kind of fickle, the dwarves. They didn't like the weather. Just you know, they need things to be a certain way, and I wasn't always able to do that for them. So I would give it a 3 out of 5. They're fine. They'll make it, but like they might be looking for a new place to live if it gets too boring, you know? Now, moving on to Rimworld. Looks. I liked our settlement. I think it had a good aesthetic. You know, they came in, they were just a lost tribe, they lost their village, and they set up a couple buildings handmade. Like, that's impressive. I don't know if you guys have built your own house with your bare hands, but that's probably no joke. I'm gonna give that a 4 out of 5 on the looks category. I liked it. The only reason it's not a 5 is that there was kind of like blood everywhere from all the injuries, which we'll get to. Efficiency, not efficient. I was pretty much always micromanaging the entire 4 days of Rimworld, and sometimes it got a little frustrating when I'm like, can you just cook? And they would run off and start like stargazing. So sometimes it's hit or miss. I give it a 2 out of 5 on the efficiency. Safety. Oh, it's a 1, bro. I mean, people are getting sick, food poisoning. They're collapsing just from exhaustion. We had multiple attacks, and we couldn't do anything. We just had to run up and fight to the death. I mean, it was just insane. So that's a 1 out of 5 safety. That is a dangerous place to live. It's my fault. Don't tell them though. And overall happiness. I mean, for the situation, you know, they kind of had some good spirits sometimes. When they weren't like in pain, you know, they were doing pretty good. They'd chat with each other, and I think, you know, we could have turned it around in the long term. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5 happiness from Rimworld. So here are the average scores. So I ran the numbers, and Dwarf Fortress came in at 3.5 out of 5 on average. Rimworld came in at 2.5 out of 5. So honestly, they came out pretty close statistically. I mean, I definitely saw the edge in Dwarf Fortress, but I think that's mostly part of the design. I think Rimworld is supposed to be more random, more chaotic, and that's sort of kind of the fun of Rimworld, whereas Dwarf Fortress, you're trying to like be as efficient as possible, because that game basically, it was just a numbers game for so long. It just got the graphics update, but really people were just kind of looking at the numbers. They'd see the symbols, but it really wasn't about aesthetics or whatever. So that's the final scores. If you guys enjoyed the video, I really appreciate you watching to the end. I had a blast making this, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.